pretty embarrassing for Mr. Modi to be preempted by Trump and to be shown up as somebody who has compromised under pressure from Trump. In this case, it is pretty clear that it is the US intervention which has led to this breakthrough between India and Pakistan. So when you say millions of lives that are going to be lost, that's an euphemism for, as you know, nuclear war, nuclear weapons being used. It's a major setback for India's foreign policy going back many decades. And this is exactly what Pakistan wanted. It makes me extremely sad that for the first time, I am witnessing something amongst neutral observers where they are willing to consider Pakistani media as having greater credibility than what Indian so-called journalists are putting out. That is really sad and shameful.
Hi, welcome to this special interview. Yesterday, India and Pakistan announced a ceasefire to their 3-day hostilities. We're here with Sushant Singh, lecturer at Yale and consulting editor, Caravan and defense expert, to unpack what this historic event means. Welcome to Scroll, Sushant.
Thank you so much, Shoaib, for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So one of the most striking things that happened yesterday was it was Mr. Trump that announced the ceasefire, not India or Pakistan. What is this? And the US is also sort of selling this as a US brokered ceasefire. What does this mean for India's foreign policy and India's strategic objectives?
Firstly, there are two parts to it. One is very clearly that President Trump likes to take credit for everything, whatever happens. Even in 2019, when the Balakot crisis was on, when the two sides were talking, President Trump had preempted the Indian and Pakistani governments and announced it. But in this case, it is pretty clear that it is the US intervention led by Secretary of State and National Security Advisor and the Marco Rubio and the Vice President J.D. Vance, which has led to this breakthrough between India and Pakistan. There's enough reportage already available to suggest that they really pressed upon J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, pressed upon Mr. Modi, while Marco Rubio was able to press upon the Pakistani army chief to arrive at some kind of agreement, some kind of arrangement, some kind of understanding, so that the ceasefire could take place. Now, what does it mean for India's foreign policy? It means a lot for India's foreign policy. It is pretty embarrassing for Mr. Modi to be preempted by Trump and to be shown up as somebody who has compromised under pressure from Trump. Now, that's something which is pretty sad, because Mr. Modi historically over the last 10, 11 years has tried to project himself as a big global leader who's not bullied by anyone, who doesn't listen to anyone, and everybody in the world seeks his advice. But in this case, it is pretty clear that he and his government could not sustain the pressure that came from President Trump and succumb to it. This also means that India's long-standing ideal or view that any crisis with Pakistan, any issue with Pakistan, is a bilateral issue and should not be internationalized, should not go into global discussion. That has been negated. Once this becomes public, over a period of time, whether it is Kargil or elsewhere, many US presidents, many US officials have intervened, but those have always been in the background. Now, this is completely in the forefront. And therefore, what we are witnessing is clearly a meltdown of the right-wing ecosystem, which is trying to either justify what has gone on, trying to, having to eat their own words, where they were saying that there will be no peace and this is not like the UPA government. And and some others, who are disappointed with what's going on. Even people like Swapan Das Gupta and others I was just seeing on X are kind of disappointed with how things have panned out. So all in all, it has put Mr. Modi in some kind of an embarrassing position. But knowing the kind of control he has over India's corporate-owned mass media, we should expect that they will try and spin it and get a narrative where this will also be posited as a victory, and the role of President Donald Trump, Vice President and the Secretary of State would be marginalized.
So a couple of things you said. One is, there is some right-wing anger against ceasefire. Swapan Das Gupta is a good example. I think, unfortunately, Mr. Misri is getting attacked. Although I guess he would have just read out something that was decided by the Union Cabinet. A couple of things I want to unpack from you, Sushant. Could you just quickly expand for our readers, what is the reportage on the US role?
So the reportage of the US role essentially comes mainly from CNN. which has and a bit from New York and a bit from New York Times. So and the reportage is more or less in agreement with each other. The reportage is that by Friday afternoon, Friday noon U.S. time, it was pretty clear to the Trump administration, particularly to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that things were escalating at a pretty fast pace and were likely to go out of hand. And it is at that point in time he approached Vice President J.D. Vance and President Trump that they should press on both the capitals and all the decision makers to really step back, because this could get out of hand. What exactly the intelligence was, did it relate to Pakistan's nuclear capabilities or something else? We don't know yet. But then it was decided that the Vice President, J.D. Vance, whose wife is of Indian origin, her parents were Indian immigrants, Usha Vance, J.D. Vance would call up Mr. Modi and tell him that things can go completely out of hand and he should step back and start talking to the talking to the Pakistanis. Similarly, Marco Rubio spoke to Asim Munir, Shahbaz Sharif, and others on the Pakistani side. Meanwhile, Mr. Doval, Mr. Jaishankar, and others were spoken on the Indian side as well. And eventually, it was pressed upon both India and Pakistan that they should talk to each other, and that is how the two DGMOs spoke to each other, and some kind of agreement or arrangement or understanding was arrived at about the ceasefire.
So a couple of things I want to jump off from this, Sushant. One is, you've said that, obviously US has always been involved in mediation, but this is public like never before. In fact, this morning, Mr. Trump tweeted out, or rather he put it out on Truth Social and then later tweeted out, a so-called offer for mediation to find a quote-unquote solution to the Kashmir crisis. So India has always, like you said, sort of gone against the idea that Kashmir is an international issue. Kashmir is an issue at all, actually. Does this blow the lid on a lot of success that India had over the last couple of decades?
Not only a couple of decades, the whole idea of Kashmir being a bilateral issue emerges out of the Simla Agreement of 1972. And the history, as you know, in 1965, India came under tremendous pressure from the Soviet Union when Lal Bahadur Shastri had to go to Tashkent for a ceasefire and a peace agreement with Pakistan, with Ayub Khan. Before leaving Delhi, Shastri had announced that he would not give up Haji Pir Pass at any cost. Haji Pir Pass is a militarily important pass on what was then the ceasefire line and what is now the line of control. But eventually, under Soviet pressure, he had to give up the Haji Pir Pass to Pakistan. Unfortunately, Shastri passed away there, had a massive heart attack in Tashkent, and passed away there. But it was pretty embarrassing for him to do that he had to give up Haji Pir. Similarly, after India lost the 1962 border war to China, John F. Kennedy put a lot of pressure, because at that time the Indian military, Indian armed forces were being built up by the United States, and Sushant Singh Bhutto talks took place over Kashmir, where Bhutto, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Benazir Bhutto's father, really acted very haughty against Sushant Singh, because he believed that Pakistan had the upper hand and India will have to roll over after it had lost to China. Of course, those talks failed and India didn't concede anything. And all through this period in the 50s, 60s, India came under tremendous pressure from the West and from its friends in both in the UK as well as the Soviet Union about Kashmir. And that's why when India defeated Pakistan militarily in 1971, Mrs. Gandhi was very clear that this has to be made bilateral. And this emerges out of 1972 Shimla Accord, that the Kashmir issue or any issue between India and Pakistan is a bilateral issue, and we are not going to go for any kind of international mediation or negotiation or interlocution. But as we know, in 1999, President Bill Clinton intervened. Nawaz Sharif on 4th of July was in White House, where he was pressed upon. But Vajpayee did not go to White House, and whatever he told Vajpayee, President Clinton told Vajpayee, did not come out in the public. The same thing happened in 2008 or 2016 or 2001 or 2019. Nothing became public in this blatant manner. This is pretty blatant. And you spoke about President Trump's update on Truth Social. So there's not only just Kashmir. There are three parts to it, Shoaib. The first part simply is that he's again hyphenating India and Pakistan. He's talking about both India and Pakistan being great nations. So if you look in the last 20 years, what India has always said is, pitch us against China, dehyphenate India and Pakistan. The whole crisis with Holbrooke, when he wanted to have India as part of his mandate on AFPAC, essentially came out of that India has said we should not be clubbed with Pakistan. Therefore, dignitaries who are coming from the West, like the US presidents, should not combine India and Pakistan trip. This is a major, emphasis of the Indian government over the last 20 odd years. So this clearly means that India and Pakistan are again hyphenated when Trump talks about those two countries. The second thing is President Trump also spoke about millions of lives being lost if things had gotten out of hand or if a conflict had taken place. So when you say millions of lives that are going to be lost, that's an euphemism for, as you know, nuclear war, nuclear weapons being used. Now, in case of India and Pakistan in South Asia, the only country which threatens to preemptively use nuclear weapons is Pakistan. So essentially, Trump has succumbed to the Pakistani nuclear threat, or an implicit nuclear threat that comes from Pakistan. And the third thing, as you highlight, is internationalizing the Kashmir issue, which is what Pakistan has wanted for a long time. So these are the three things which essentially Pakistan and the Pakistani army and the Pakistani establishment wanted. These are the three things which the Indian government, not just Mr. Modi's, but governments preceding him, going up to Indira Gandhi, going up to Shastri, going to Nehru, have always opposed. And this is something where it's a major setback for India's foreign policy going back many decades. And this is exactly what Pakistan wanted. Now, I don't know how serious President Trump is and what kind of capacity or power he has to implement this or to push India into accepting this. But on the face of it, what is out in the public, it doesn't good look for Mr. Modi, particularly because he's seen as a master of this kind of public diplomacy and PR and what is put out in the public, putting pictures of hugging global leaders or backslapping them, putting reels or clips which show great familiarity with various top leaders. This is pretty embarrassing for a person like him who has a very carefully crafted image that India has suffered so much under him.
I'm going to come back to the domestic point, Sushant. One thing that I want to quickly help you unpack is, since Pakistan became a nuclear nation, India has had this very complex engagement with Pakistan, right? And Mr. Modi has, for better or for worse, completely overturned that, and he's gone for this gung-ho kind of very aggressive, directly striking Pakistan. So do you think that we need to now go back to what was the UAPA style, which was often attacked, but did it actually have more impact? Did it contain Pakistan better than what we are doing now?
Shoaib, it's not exactly true that this is the first time India and Pakistan have fought a war under the nuclear overhang. As you know, Pakistan had developed its nuclear weapons in the 1980s and even done formal testing in 1998. And the Kargil War, which was a pretty big war, more than 1,000 people died on either side, including on both, if you include both the sides. That Kargil War was fought under the nuclear overhang. Both India and Pakistan were declared nuclear powers at that point in time. So that's historically not correct. Or even in 2001, when Prime Minister Vajpayee mobilized the armed forces after the attack on Parliament and the Kaluchak attack, although military operations were not launched, also happened under the threat of nuclear umbrella, so to speak. So in that sense, Mr. Modi, has he overturned a long-standing policy? No. What the UPA did was very different, and I genuinely believe that what Shiv Shankar Menon wrote in his book Choices makes a lot of sense. That you took huge advantage out of not going kinetic against Pakistan. Firstly, you became the darling of the West. Absolutely, the United States started giving you the kind of support which had historically not been available to India, both in terms of technology, in terms of intelligence sharing, in terms of diplomatic support, and that is essentially linked to India's geopolitical rise, is linked to India's great restraint. Pakistan became a pariah nation in the global. Globally across the world, whereas India was seen as a very mature country, a country which takes responsible decisions. So it worked out very well for India, even economically, even with respect to China. And India got that opportunity to grow faster. This is the period when growth has just been going on for 4 or 5 years. And that economic growth continued under the UPA government because it did not have to divert its energies towards a military conflict. Let's also not forget the fact, and this is Shiv Shankar Menon again quoted in Rajdeep's book, which comes after 2019 election, that the military chiefs in 2008 really did not give any options on the table. Nobody came up and said, let's do this. So it was not that India had many military options, but I think the UPA government, Dr. Manmohan Singh, made the best use out of what the circumstances were, and actually won over the whatever the best they could make out of the circumstances. Somebody who served in the Obama administration at that time in the White House at a very senior position, he clearly told me that the orders from President Obama to him were that give everything that the Indians want, but make sure there is no war between India and Pakistan. Give whatever they want. He says, I slept for 3 continuous weeks within the White House, did not go to my home, and did whatever the Indians were asking for. He said the blanket instructions were give everything that they want, but we don't want a conflict between India and Pakistan. And I think India took great advantage of the policy that it followed. Mr. Modi, when we come to Mr. Modi, and I know I'm taking some more time, when we come to Mr. Modi in 2015 and 2016, if you remember after Pathankot, he tried to actually even involve ISI in an investigation in an Indian airbase. So it is not that he did not try to go down that path, but clearly that those motives did not work out. That methodology did not work out. Then in 2016, we had these very small special forces operations across the line of control, which were hyped up as surgical strikes before the UP elections. And then you have 2019 Balakot, where a military failure was disguised, what became a major political success. And that has essentially, post 2019, what we have seen is that India has essentially boxed itself into very limited options, rather than increasing the kind of options that it has in terms of, as part of statecraft, where you have diplomatic options, economic options, other kinds of options, people-to-people contacts, in case of India, water sharing, energy, other kinds of pacts. You have taken all of them off the table, and you have boxed yourself into only a punitive military option. And even in that punitive military option, you have to do something more than what you have already done earlier. What you had done in 2016, you have to do more in 2019. What you had done in 2019, you have to do much more in 2025. So actually, any statesman, any leader has to increase the options that are available to them and use both, a carrot and stick at the same time to reward the adversary. If Pakistan does something right, you reward him, you give him the carrot. And if he does something wrong, you use the stick. Right now, what we have is a very small box.
One of the things that you said, Sushant, is that, one of your, going back to your Caravan article, you said Balakot was a political success. Now, what is happening is that India's relations with Pakistan are becoming a public political issue, which you're saying is maybe actually boxing India in, right? It's actually reducing its fear of options that are available to it.
Yeah, I think Mr. Modi has himself boxed himself in by taking away all the other options away from the table, and by not using both carrot and stick as part of statecraft. That's essentially what I'm saying. If he were to use all the other options, including diplomacy, including economy, let's say if India gave an incentive of trade, if Pakistan handed over Hafiz Saeed or something like that, hypothetically speaking, or a SARC meeting for some small things. You have a graduated reward system by which you tell your adversary that if you do this right, I will do this, and if you do this wrong, then I'll punish you. Right now, we have no rewards. We are only saying I'll do punitive strikes, and we are saying I'll do punitive strikes where, because of, as you said, domestic compulsion, I am forced to respond beyond the previous level. And of course, I cannot go beyond a certain level, because then there is the threat of nuclear escalation and Western intervention, as we have seen this time.
So do you think it'll be wise for India to now, at least in some small way, start talking to Pakistan again?
Oh, definitely. If India's strategic challenge is coming from China, and Pakistan is not the strategic challenge, and no country can fight two fronts at the same time. Napoleon lost when he went for two fronts. Hitler lost when he went for two fronts. The biggest and the most powerful countries in the world have not been able to take on two fronts. India cannot afford to fight on two fronts. You can't talk to China because China is a strategic threat. It's a huge challenge. It wants a unipolar Asia. You will have to contest China in any case. The only country with which you can clearly have peace among these two adversaries is Pakistan. If you were to manage Pakistan, engage Pakistan, so that you don't box yourself in this manner. And this is not some, I'm not saying candle lighting, Wagah peacenik kind of a thing. I'm saying as a realist. As a realist, you need to engage with Pakistan so that you take one of the adversaries off the table. You are only dealing with China as a strategic threat, as a long-term challenger, and remove Pakistan off the table as a strategic challenge.
So, in fact, one of the most terrible things that has come out from India is that there's a China-Pakistan axis right now, right?
Yeah, China-Pakistan nexus has been there since the late 1950s, when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, as Pakistani foreign minister, decided that they need to cast their lot with China, and since then they've been the closest partners. So, as what they call in strategic parlance, there is a collusive threat that India faces from China and Pakistan, a two-front collusive threat. And as we have seen in the last week or so, a lot of Chinese military equipment, a lot of high-end Chinese technology has been used and deployed by Pakistan against India, and if you go by Western media reports, somewhat successfully.
I want you to unpack a little bit of this, Sushant. There has been a lot of chatter around specifically the jets. We've read reports in which uh, Pakistan has claimed that it used Chinese jets. Could you unpack some of that for our viewers?
So the Pakistan has Chinese jets, J-10, JF-17. That is well known. What they have claimed, and which has not been reported in the Indian media, and whenever it has tried to be reported, has been pulled down. Whether it was the case of the Wire, where their whole portal was taken down, or Hindu, where Vijay's story had to be pulled down. What the Pakistanis are claiming is that using Chinese weaponry and Chinese platforms like the J-10 and the AR-15 missile, they have been able to take down India's Rafale aircraft. Their claim is that they brought down 5 Indian aircraft, including 3 Rafale, 1 Sukhoi, and 1 MiG-29 on the first night of conflict. The Indian side has not denied this claim, but it has not even confirmed the claim, and no Indian media house has reported it. But all the global media houses, including CNN, BBC, New York Times, Washington Post, Le Monde, Libération, everybody has reported and confirmed using satellite imagery and other video images that at least India lost 2 fighter jets that evening, at least 2, if not more, and at least one of them was a Rafale. If that success came because of use of Chinese weapons and Chinese platforms, then this would be the first time in the modern era that a Chinese weapon on a Chinese platform has taken down a high-end Western platform. So Chinese weaponry has never been used earlier. So when China fought the Korean War against the United States in 1950s, it was using Soviet equipment. It is only in the recent years that Chinese equipment has come into play. And this is the first time we are seeing Chinese weaponry being used against high-end Western equipment. Rafale is a 4.5 generation fighter, 4.5 generation fighter. And not many had expected that the Chinese weaponry and Chinese platforms would be successful against it. And therefore, this Pakistani claim has significance, which goes beyond the subcontinent, which goes beyond India and Pakistan. It has significance for Taiwan. It has significance for defense companies. It has significance for geostrategy. It has a huge meaning, and there is huge global interest in how this actually played out. And India's silence is not adding to the discomfort, to the controversy around it.
Is there alarm in vested capitals at this alleged news?
Oh yes, there is definitely a lot more than alarm. There's a lot of interest as to because this would mean that the Chinese military technology, Chinese defense technology, Chinese weapons and platforms have reached their level where they are at par with or better than the Western equipment, and that's something which would be which is something which has a lot of significance, as I said, which has a lot of meaning, deeper meaning going into the future.
And what does this mean for India's Rafale fleet?
No, Rafale is a damn good aircraft. It is a very modern aircraft. The aircraft can come down for various reasons. You might have used the Air Force in a wrong manner. So please remember, Shoaib, that Air Force has to first go and destroy the radars and the air defense mechanism before it gets deployed. But if you are using Air Force in a tactical manner for anti-terror operations, you are leaving them vulnerable to being quickly monitored, because you're not taking out the air defense in the first go. That plus the kind of other enabling platforms, what you have from AVACs to electronic warfare equipment and other things which enable these kind of environment. So you have so this is not the 1960s, 70s or the Second World War where you're going to have a dogfight. This is a very electronic kind of environment. Think of it as a video game almost, where somebody is seeing everything, and then all the engagement that happens, all the firing that happens is beyond visual range. Nobody is seeing the aircraft. You are only seeing a speck or a mark on your screen, and somebody else is guiding you, and you're like a video game firing on that. So in this case, it's not just the aircraft or the pilot. There is the whole enabling environment which has to be there. There could be weaknesses there. There could be weaknesses in operational deployment. There could be other weaknesses. It necessarily does not mean that there is a problem with the Rafale aircraft. And moreover, we still have to get confirmation from the Indian side that they lost some Rafale aircraft, one or two, or whatever the reality is, before we can actually discuss and debate this in any great detail.
I want to go back to a point that you started off with. So you had written that Balakot was a political success. Do you think something similar will happen with this ceasefire, or do you see it going all right, the BJP?
Shoaib, you are a political analyst, political writer, political journalist. I'm sure you know this better than better than I do. My own sense at this point is too early to tell. I will use the Chinese line which Zhao Enlao used in 1968. Too early to tell. I honestly, yeah, I still don't know.
Too early
Yes,
to
too
tell
early.
about the consequences. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really don't know. But initially, what it seems to me is that there is huge discomfort in the right wing ecosystem of the BJP about how things have played out. And unlike 2019, even amongst the media or journalists or analysts, there has not been unanimity about what has gone on. There have been more disturbing questions that have emerged this time about the political leadership, their decision making, their deployment of the military. The fact that at least two retired army chiefs, General Ved Malik and General Narwane, have been very disappointed and have expressed their disappointment publicly on X about this ceasefire, as to why this ceasefire was done, is clearly something which shows that even in this very nationalist military constituency, retired military veteran constituency, there are questions being asked about what Mr. Modi has done, and particularly Trump's public antics, the statement from the U.S. State Department, what Marco Rubio has said, and the way Pakistanis have responded. It's not a very pleasant scenario, and it is not as one-sided as it seemed in 2019 to me.
Yeah, what really gets my goat sometimes is just the way Trump tweets, as if he's talking to children. Like, I mean, it's just it's so irritating that a head of state would even talk like that to other heads of state. I want to end with one question, Sushant. We saw the role of what we're calling Godi media nowadays was a big part in the last 3 days. I want you to unpack what it means to have such a, for lack of a better word, crazy media for India's sort of military aims, strategic aims, as well as what it does for India's international image.
No, Shoaib, I completely agree with you. The conduct of India's big media, what we call Godi media, if you take out some of the independent platforms with which we are associated and our friends are associated, Caravan, Scroll, Wire, News Minute, News Laundry, or maybe a few others. The rest of the media, including some of India's most reputed newspapers, have been pretty shameful in their coverage of the whole thing. Either they are lying, or they don't show, or they don't give context. And particularly these television journalists and television editors, their reportage and their conduct on social media has been absolutely pathetic, for want of a better word. What does it mean strategically? What it means strategically is, firstly, they mislead the country. Secondly, they create a hype and a kind of a pressure which can compel the government to either tell lies or cover up things, or do things which it may not be wanting to do, but because it feels under pressure that it has to demonstrate boldness and aggressiveness and some kind of 56-inch chest kind of a behavior, where there's so much of pressure is being built upon you. The third thing that they do is that they completely destroy the credibility of whatever is being put out by the Indian side. It is the first time in many years that I have seen the Pakistani statements, Pakistani media being seen as more credible than what is coming out of the Indian side. It is highly unfortunate. It is very sad. It makes me extremely sad that for the first time, I am witnessing something amongst neutral observers where they are willing to consider Pakistani media and Pakistani reports as having greater credibility than what Indian television media and electronic and its journalists, so-called journalists, are putting out. That is really sad and shameful. Please remember, Shoaib, in 1999, it was India's media which really helped India win the war. A very senior Pakistani official at that time told me very clearly that the reason Musharraf, when he took power after the military coup post Kargil, started private television channels in Pakistan was because of the experience of Kargil. He believed Indian television channels post Kargil were a battle-winning factor. And therefore, he created independent channels in Pakistan, not out of a love for democracy or freedom of speech. He was a general. He didn't love all those things. He thought
Right.
they were strategic tools. That strategic tool, which India used beautifully in 1999, has been completely destroyed. It has become poisonous, it has become venomous, and it has become, detrimental to India's national interests.
That's something I think we saw right through this. The fact that I think amongst Western commentators and Western media, India was always losing out on the narrative war.
Yeah, that's true, Shoaib. I completely agree with you. We were not winning the narrative war this time, which we should have won very easily, considering Pakistan has a very poor reputation and doesn't carry much global standing in any case.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sushant. That was
Thank
defense.
you, Shoaib. As always, lovely talking to you.
Thank you. That was defense expert Sushant Singh unpacking the ceasefire that was announced last evening. Thank you so much for joining us, viewers. If you like the journalism that we do and you want to help us support independent media, go to scroll.in/contribute. Thank you for watching.